Under legislation, you should be able to identify all legislations from the scenario. As I said in the previous slide, to say the focus now is on how to identify and which content to identify from the scenario. So you should know how to identify Skills Development Act. You should know how to identify Labor Relations Act. You should know how to identify Employment Equity Act, together with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, together with the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, and the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, together with the National Credit Act and the Consumer Protection Act. And what would help you to identify the following legislations from the scenario is their keywords and the understanding of each of these legislations. For instance, with skills development, any scenario that says identify the act and talks about improving the skills, it talks about training the employees, you should know that the act that is applicable there is skills development. And then should an act or scenario talk about a dispute between the employee? Should it talk about a trade union? Should it talk about the workplace forum, or talk about a union representation and the rights of the employer and the employee? You should know that the answer that is correct is Labor Relations Act. Then with employment equity, the first key aspect would be the word affirmative action. With affirmative action, it guides you to say what is the correct answer, and it becomes a keyword for Employment Equity Act. If you see equal opportunities, if you see equal genders, if you see equal races, you should know that the answer is employment equity, because employment equity talks about employing equally, and it also it can talk about equity plans. So you should know that anything that has to do with equity plans, anything that has to do with affirmative action, anything that has to do with equal opportunities between races or genders, the answer should be Employment Equity Act. Then Basic Conditions of Employment Act, it would be applicable in a case of provisions, in a case of talking about working hours, talking about the leave, the overtime. You should know that the answer is Basic Conditions of Employment Act. But with the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, it will talk about the pillars, it will talk about the economy and empowering those who were previously disadvantaged to participate in the economy. And Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, the scenario will talk about employees getting injured. It will talk about the business promoting safety. And then when you look into the National Credit Act, if you see anything that talks about reckless spending, that talks about reckless granting of credit by the business, you should know that it would then apply to the act we call National Credit Act. If it talks about a loan, if it talks about assessing the loan, assessing credit worthiness, the answer should be National Credit Act. Consumer protection, if it talks about consumers being treated unfairly in the market without the use of credit, without the use of borrowing money, and you should know the answer is Consumer Protection Act. Now, let us look into the typical question to say, this question is on a scenario. So the instruction would say to you, read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. Then, cyber enterprise, CE. Cyber enterprise, according to this scenario, sells smartphones online. The management of CE allows employees to form a trade union. Employees are allowed to form a trade union. Okay. Then cyber enterprise also ensures the implementation of the affirmative action. I will encircle it as well. And then the question now. What is the verb? Identify. The verb is identify. There are two acts. Remember grade 12, how many acts are you having? 8. You have 8 acts, meaning out of the 8 you are expected to identify only 2. Now you are identifying the two acts applicable to the scenario above and motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario above for 6 marks, meaning 2 marks will be allocated for each act and 2 marks for another act and 1 mark for motivation. Then 2.2, explain the impact of the acts identified in question 2.1. So here you're providing the impact, the positives and the negatives. So I would give you 2 minutes here. Let me give you 2 minutes. You try to identify the 2 acts. With the 2 minutes, I just want you to answer 2.1. Identify which act, especially because I gave you an idea through the tips that you should think about when answering a question that requires of you to identify the act. So now I'll give you 2 minutes, identify the acts for me, and I should be giving you 1 minute, but let me be kind and give you 2 minutes. You try to answer, then I will come back with the solution. So let me give you 2 minutes. Use the word now. You use what I encircled for you as a guide to say which act deals with what Mr. Tlhaka has encircled. So let me give you 2 minutes. You try to answer and I'll come back with a solution. Welcome back. Now let us look into the solution using the scenario. The scenario is an indirect question, meaning you need to understand the scenario for you to be able to answer the question. Now, the scenario starts by saying cyber enterprise sells smartphones online. The management of cyber enterprise allows employees to form a trade union. Now, think about it. Where have you seen trade union? In which act? In which legislation? You have seen the word trade union when you were learning about the Labor Relations Act. So the answer should be Labor Relations Act, because it is an act that talks about the relationship between the employer and the employee, and the involvement of trade unions to represent employees, and the involvement of employers' organization to represent the employer, so that there could be peaceful negotiations or a collective bargaining process between the employer and the employee if there are demands from the employee's side. Then cyber enterprise also, so for the word trade union, it's supposed to be Labor Relations Act, and cyber enterprise also ensures the implementation of affirmative action. Affirmative action is a key word for which legislation out of the 8 is the key word for employment equity, because affirmative action is for Employment Equity Act, because affirmative action deals with what? Grade 12. It deals with the idea of employing equally, especially those who were previously disadvantaged and they are suitable and qualified. So in the process of employing, the business should implement an Employment Equity Act policy called affirmative action. By doing what, grade 12s? By implementing affirmative action. What does it say? Affirmative action says if a business is in the process of employing or hiring, the business should consider those who were previously disadvantaged. This can be females, this can be Africans, this can be coloreds, because they were previously disadvantaged together with Indians. So they can be considered to be previously disadvantaged. Therefore, in a process of hiring or employing, a business should make sure that they consider those who were previously disadvantaged. And I gave you a practical example. So the answer is Employment Equity Act. And now, how do you provide your motivation? See, the motivation is saying, the question on motivation says motivate your answer by quoting. And where are you quoting? You are quoting in the scenario. Therefore, labor relations. And how do you quote? Are you only quoting trade union? No, you don't quote trade union only. You quote the entire sentence. Where's the sentence starting? Here. The management of cyber enterprise allows employees to form a trade union. Therefore, you quote it again. The management of cyber enterprise, as you can see, allows employees to form a trade union. 1 mark for the motivation. Why? Because it is quoted in full, as it is from the scenario. Then, cyber enterprise also ensures the implementation. Where did we see that? Cyber enterprise also ensures the implementation of the what? Affirmative action. Of the what? Affirmative action. Then 1 mark. Is the act correct? Yes. Employment Equity Act. So that is how you get your marks. 2 marks for motivation, 4 marks for identifying. In total, 6. Now, let us look into explaining the impact of the acts identified in 2.1. The acts include labor relations. What is the impact? If a question is looking for the impact, you are allowed to provide advantages or positives only. You are also allowed to provide disadvantages or negatives only, or you are also allowed to provide positives and negatives, or advantages and disadvantages. Therefore, when the question is saying impact of the acts identified in question 2.1, we want to see you showing the understanding of saying now, what are the positives and what are the negatives? And you are allowed to provide both positives and negatives because the question is saying impact. And be careful of this. Do not use the headings advantage and disadvantage, because should you confuse a fact that is supposed to fall under a negative and write it under the advantage, you might lose your marks. So be careful. Make sure that you just provide responses without labeling the advantages and disadvantages. Therefore, with that being said, what are the advantages of a Labor Relations Act? It ensures participation of all parties in the collective bargaining process, which reduces conflict in the workplace. It protects the rights of the business and employers organization in what? In labor related matters. And what are the negatives now? The negatives are the implementation. So the implementation of Labor Relations Act may be very costly and time consuming, especially the lengthy dispute processes. And then productivity may decrease. Productivity decreasing, that is a disadvantage. That is a negative impact on the business. It may decrease significantly if employees engage in trade union related activities during work hours. If they engage in trade, meaning they are leaving the workplace to go and represent other employees on trade union matters. Therefore, the business is suffering because now production becomes slow as one employee is not operating in their machine. One employee is not is out of the workplace to go and attend to trade union activities. And then the implementation of labor relations may be very costly and time consuming, especially the dispute resolution process. Now we look into another act, which is Employment Equity Act, and we look into the advantages again and the disadvantages. So when you look into employment equity, it encourages diversity in the business by employing people from various racial backgrounds, and it provides all employees with an equal opportunity during the selection, appointments and promotions in the workplace. So because this is an act that talks about what? Employment. What is to employ is to hire. And then equity. What is equity? Is equal. So what does it mean? Hiring equally is an act that protects the people who are applying for jobs to say they should be hired equally. So now, hence we say, because you are hiring equally, you are hiring equally in terms of the gender, meaning the business is going to have males and females, meaning the business is going to have equality in terms of races. The business is going to have Africans, the business is going to have coloreds, the business is going to have Indians, and the business is going to have whites, and possibilities of employees from other countries. Therefore, we say it encourages diversity, because the word diversity means to be different. So it encourages diversity in the business by employing people from various or different racial background, and then it provides all employees with equal opportunity during the selection, appointments, and promotions in the workplace. Everyone is considered. Males are considered, females are considered, Africans are considered, whites are considered, Indians are considered, and colors are considered. Therefore, it is giving equal opportunities to everyone. Then, what are the disadvantages? Businesses must submit an employment equity plan and a compliance certificate before the business can conduct business with the state. Before they can work with the government, they need to provide compliance certificates. Training cost of businesses increase. Now, anything that increases the cost, anything that wastes the business time is considered to be a disadvantage. So training cost of the business increase because employees need to be correctly trained regarding the implementation of the Employment Equity Act in the business. So that becomes a disadvantage. And then as we proceed, you should know how to identify the following under legislation. We said, firstly, you should know how to identify the act. Now we are saying you should further know how to identify the following. For instance, under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, know how to identify the provisions of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Under the Consumer Protection Act, know how to identify the consumer rights. Under the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, know how to identify the pillars that I call MOSES. The first M is for management control, then followed by the O, which is for ownership, then followed by the skills development, which stands for the S, the first S. Then you have the E, which is the enterprise and supplier development, which is the E. Then another one is the social responsibility, which is the other S. So that is your MOSES. So you should know how to identify the pillars of what now? Of the broad-based black economic empowerment, grade 12s. And also know how to identify the what now? The provisions of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And also know how to identify from the scenario statement the Consumer Protection Act. And what under the Consumer Protection Act? Consumer rights, according to the Consumer Protection Act. Now let us start. Now the question is phrased in a statement, not in a scenario-based question. Now, the statement will say to you, identify the provisions of BCEA that Lerato Construction complied with in each of the statements below. Let's see. The first statement, 2.2.1. Employees are required to give due notice before they can end their employment contract. Lerato Construction does not force its employees to work more than 3 hours extra per day. Then employees are advised to produce a medical certificate if they are absent from work for more than 2 consecutive days. Therefore, let's identify the provisions that are applicable. And what do? You identify the key word that would help you to answer these questions on the provision. So you go back to the scenario or statement again in this regard and say employees are required to give due notice before the end of the employment contract. So end of the employment contract and notice. Therefore, what is the answer there? The answer is supposed to be termination. Termination of employment. Because the due notice will help the employee to end the employment contract. But the process is a notice should be given and should be served. In this regard, an employee is doing the right thing as is supposed or it is required of the employee to give a notice before a contract can end. And that process is a provision that we call termination of employment. To say before you terminate an employment contract, you should give a certain notice. Lerato Construction does not force its employees to work more than 3 hours extra per day. So there we are talking about what? a provision that talks about working extra hours, and we have normal hours and we have extra, and we don't call it, or you don't respond and say extra hours. Yes, your keyword is extra, but your answer should say overtime. Overtime, it is over the time that is normally a working hour. Employees are advised to produce a medical certificate if they are absent from work for more than 2 consecutive days. So in this regard, the employee was not at work. So the question is now, which provision talks about employees staying away from work for a particular reason or for any reason? So employees are advised to produce a medical certificate if they are absent from work for more than 2 consecutive days. So this one would also talk to what? A leave. I know you assume that the answer is sick leave. It cannot be sick leave. This is incorrect. Why? Because the provisions for PCEA, we don't have a provision called sick leave, but we have a provision called leave. However, if the question was saying identify the types of leave or the leave provisions, then the answer would be correct to be sick leave. So in this regard, the question is not looking for leave provisions, but the question is looking for a provision. So a provision that allows an employee to stay 2 consecutive or certain days if they are sick is called a leave. And the type of leave is sick leave. So the question is looking for a provision, not the type of leave. Keep that in mind. Then, identify the pillars of Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, which is Act of 2003 and Act number 53, that Mpho Auditors has complied with in each of the statements below. So with this one, I will want you to answer. I'm giving you 2 minutes. You try to answer the provisions, and then we move on to how you are supposed to give or identify the correct answer if you fail to. So let me give you 2 minutes. Welcome back. Now, how do we go about answering this question? Identify the pillar of the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, which is Act 53 of 2003, that Mpho Auditors has complied with in each statement below. 2.3.1 says Mpho Auditors uses Temba Shuttle Services to transport their employees. So Temba Shuttle Services is a small business that Mpho Auditors is trying to improve. Therefore, the pillar that talks about helping small, medium enterprises or small businesses to develop so that they can hire more and more employees and also participate in the economy by allowing others as well to participate in the economy from the assistance of a business that is well established, then that is enterprise and supplier development. Then they have donated laptops to schools in rural areas. What is the answer there? They are helping where they are operating or in the immediate community. Therefore, the answer is social responsibility. Then Mpho Auditors has promoted 2 black females as heads of various departments. So what are we seeing here? We are seeing 2 black females as heads of various what departments, meaning these females are in a management position. Therefore, the answer is management control. That's how you were supposed to go about answering that word. Then we look into identifying consumer rights that are implemented by Kalio Ltd in each statement below. So you have these 3 consumer rights that were implemented by this business. The salesperson allows customers to shop around for the best price. 2.4.2. Customers are charged the same price for the same goods or services in different areas. Consumers are given a written warranty for durable products. Now identify the consumer right that is applicable there. When you check the salesperson allowing customers to shop around, I will identify that as my keyword, charging the same price for the same goods in the different areas. It means there is equality, there is fairness to say even in different areas the price remains the same. Consumers being given what? Warranty for durable products also brings an element of what here? Brings an element of quality confirmation in a way. So what is the answer? The solution? Shopping around. It is the right to choose. Keyword is shopping around. When you're shopping around, you are having an opportunity to choose the best price, choose the best product. And then when we talk about customers being charged the same price for the same goods or service in the different market, that is equality in the consumer market, the right to equality in the consumer market. To say a consumer in rural areas can also buy in the same price with the consumer that is in the urban areas. And then another one is the right to fair value or good quality. To say as a business, because they trust the quality that they are offering, they are given a written warranty for durable products so that there is fair value and good quality. Then we look into industry analysis tools. We have 3 industry analysis tools, and you will be expected to identify for 2 of these industry analysis tools: SWOT analysis, Porter's 5 forces, together with Pestle elements. Now let us look into the Porter's 5 forces. You would be expected to identify the Porter's 5 forces from the scenario. So you have the following Porter's 5 forces: power of the supplier, power of the buyer, power of the competitors or competitive rivalry, together with threat or barriers of new entrants into the market, or threat or of substitution or substitutes. So here we're looking into the Porter's 5 force model in terms of making sure now that a business that is using this model will be able to know, to say who has power between their business and the supply, who has power between their business and the buyers, who has power between the business and its competitors, who has power in terms of a threat or barriers of new entrants into the market, and who has power in terms of threat of substitution or substitute. Is the product that is being offered by the business easily substituted, or it cannot? Now let us look into the typical question again on identify. There could be a scenario that says identify the forces of Porter's 5 model that applies to Louisa's hair salon in each statement below. 2.5.1 Lwazi opened a new hair salon across the street offering services at a lower price than Louisa's hair salon. 2.5.2 Louisa's hair salon is highly profitable and attracts many entrepreneurs to enter the market. Now identify the two Porter's 5 forces model that are applicable to those statements. So here we see Lwazi opening a new hair salon across the street, offering services at a lower price than Louisa. So Louisa's already operating a salon. Someone starts a salon across the street but offers lower prices. What are we talking about there? Then Louisa's hair salon is highly profitable and attracts many new entrepreneurs to enter this market. So here we're talking about entering and starting to offer the same service that Louisa is offering as well. So when you are dealing with statements and scenarios, please repeat the statement, please repeat the scenario. So in this regard, because Lwazi opened a new hair salon across the street, then we consider this to be the power of competitor. Then, Louisa's Hair Salon is highly profitable and attracts many new entrepreneurs to enter the market. This is considered to be what now? Threat or barriers of new entrants into the market. So let's check. Power of the competitor is threat of new entrants to the market. Then let's explain the other Porter's 5 forces model that could be used to analyze the position of the business. Now, you have that track there talking to the supplier to say, now, as a business, when using the Porter's 5 model, the business then is doing the following. The business is assessing the power of the suppliers in influencing the price. So the business is going to check all their suppliers and check to say, are the suppliers able to influence price? Then also, suppliers or the business should know, or some of the findings may be the idea that suppliers that deliver high quality products may have power over the business. Then another one is power of the buyers. With the power of the buyers, the focus here is the business will check their buyers. After checking their buyers, they are assessing how easy it is for buyers or businesses to drive down their prices. To say if the customers come and buy in bulk, they will ask for a discount. That way they are driving down the price. So the business should assess their consumers or customers or buyers to say, are the buyers of the product that we are selling in this business able to drive down the prices? And then again, buyers buying in bulk can bargain for prices in their favor. And then we proceed to power of competitors or competitive rivalry. Here we are saying the business should assess the following under competitors to say they should check their competitors. Competitors are businesses that are selling the same product to what the business is selling. For instance, KFC and Chicken Licken, they are selling the same product. They are both selling deep fried chicken. So they are selling to the same consumer. Therefore, they are competing for the same customers. Hence, we say if competitors have unique products, the business should know that, okay, because this competitor has a unique product or service, they will then have greater power than that of a business in a market. And then a business with many competitors in the same market has very little power in the market. However, threat of substitutes or substitution. Here, the business is checking the following. The business here, if the business products can easily be substituted, it weakens the power of the business in the market, meaning the business should create products that are not easily replaced. Then another one is establish. The business creators should establish whether sellers of substitute products have improved their product or they are selling lower quality goods at a lower price. As you can see here, we are having the what now? The tea, and it can be substituted by the coffee. So keep that in mind when it comes to threat of substitution. Then threat or barriers of new entrants to the market. Here the business is checking to say, with the product we are selling, is it easy for another person to start selling in the next street or across? So if barriers to enter the market are low, meaning if information is there on how to start that business, how much money is needed, is it too much money or is it less? Therefore, it means if the money is less to start a business, then the market to enter that, the market has lower barriers and it is easy for new businesses to enter the market or industry. Then if there are fewer suppliers of a product or service, but many buyers, it may be easy to enter the market because the business will still have customers. Then, as we proceed, we look into Pestel factors. We have the following Pestel factors: political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental. Now, furthermore, you might be expected to know how to identify the Pestel factors, and you have the following Pestel factors: political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental, and we call them Pestel factors. Let us see how you can be assessed on the Pestel factors. You have a scenario which is expecting of you to read and answer questions that follow. Now, the scenario is on Martha and Jane Furniture. So Martha and Jane Furniture specialize in selling office furniture. The profitability of the business has decreased due to high inflation rates and low income levels of consumers. MJF had to pay a hefty or heavy fine because they did not renew their trading license in time. 2.7.1 grade 12 now says to you, quote, 3 challenges. Now, quote 3 challenges, grade 12. 3 challenges for MJF from the scenario above for 3 marks. Then identify the pestle factor that links. Now, our keyword is our key action verb here to say identify the pestle factor that links to each challenge as quoted in question 2.7.1. Thereafter, recommend one way. And let's not be confused by the term or by the action verb recommend. Recommend doesn't mean come up with your own. You don't come up with your own grade 12. But what you actually do is you look into your notes. There are recommendations on how to deal with each of the challenge identified under each pestle factor to say how do you deal with each. Now, when you look into this scenario, the challenge number 1 is the profitability of the business has decreased due to what? High inflation rates and low income levels. Thereafter, MJF had to pay a heavy or hefty fine because they did not renew their trading license. Therefore, how many challenges are you having here? You are having challenge number 1 on high inflation, challenge number 2 on low income levels, and challenge number 3 on a fine due to a trading license. Therefore, which pestle factor is applicable there? The issue of high inflation. This high inflation is an economic aspect. So we say the pestle factor is what? Economic. Then we say low income levels of consumers. This comes from a social perspective because it is affecting the community, and the community is part of the society, which makes it to be part of the social. Then paying a heavy fine because of failing to renew the trading license is a legal aspect that the business failed to comply with. Then let us look into the actual solution here. The profitability of the business has decreased due to high inflation, as I said, but we quote in full, remember. Then we say 2 marks there, 1 mark for motivation. Low income levels, we quote in full as well. We say 1 and say 2 for social. Then MJF had to pay a hefty or a heavy fine because they did not renew their trading license. Quoted as this, legal is correct. Recommendation, if you check your notes, there is a recommendation that says for economic, the business should borrow money from financial institutions when interest rates are favorable. That is correct. Then sell substitutes for dealing with what? Low income levels of customers because they don't have enough. Therefore, the business can sell substitute or generic products at the lower price. Then with legal and the business avoiding a fine, a recommendation that you get from your notes would say comply with the legal requirements for operating businesses, for example, the license or the trademark registration or patent. That's how you should go about it. Now, as we proceed, we look into types of strategies. You might be expected to identify types of strategies, and we have 4 types of strategies, which is what I normally call DD. Why are we saying DD? Because this helps you to remember them much easier. DD because diversification and intensive, defensive and integration. So let us see how you might be asked to answer these types of strategies. The question again is the action verb we call identify. Identify the type of business strategy that Susie manufacturer applied in each statement below. We have 3 and you have 4 types of strategies. So the advice I would give is that at least write DD before you answer. That way it helps you to remember to say, okay, you have diversification, intensive, defensive, and integration. Now, Susie manufacturer takes over Andries Furniture to gain control over the direct distribution of their product. Susie decided to sell her existing furniture in a new city. Susie Furniture decided, or manufacturer decided to add a food manufacturing plant. Now, think about it. Go back to your types of strategies to say diversification is about having different products, is about adding different products from either related or unrelated to what the business is already selling as a product. Then we have integration, which is about taking over. Then we also have defensive, which is about closing down the business or trying to defend the business operations, and intensive, which is about increasing number of sales by coming up with market penetration, market development, or product development. In this regard, we don't want the types of each strategy, but we want to use the 4 strategies as the solution. So when we see Susie manufacturer taking over or took over Andries Furniture, we see that this is a merge, this is a takeover, therefore this is considered to be an integration. This is an integration strategy. Then when Susie decided to sell her existing furniture in a new city, what does that mean? That is Susie trying to gain new groups of customers because the same product is existing here and then they decide to sell it in a new city. Therefore, that is intensive. It's a way of increasing what? Sales. Then we have Susie manufacturer deciding to add a new product or manufacturing plant to increase the sales. Then this one is considered to be diversification. Then we move to another type of question. Now the question is looking for what? Defensive strategy. The question is identify. Look at it. Let me go back. Here we are saying identify types of strategies. These are the types of strategies. Intensive, diversification, integration. But here we are saying now, identify types of defensive. How many defensive strategies are you having? 3. You're having 3. That mega construction applied in each statement below. We have the following statements. Mega construction sold all their assets in order to pay their creditor. Then they terminated the employment contracts of some of the employees to reduce the cost. Then the management decided to close their unproductive information technology department. So now let us answer. Let us identify the keyword. The business sold all assets is the keyword. Terminated the employment contract is a keyword. And also decided to close one department, not the entire business, but an unproductive department by that way. Or by that we have an idea of what is the solution. So when a business is selling all assets and paying off their creditor, it is there on your notes. You know it should be liquidation. Then when the business is terminating the employment contract of many employees, that is considered to be a type of defensive strategy we call a retrenchment. Then when management decides to close their unproductive, we call that divestiture. So that is how you should go about answering. Do not confuse the question. Look into the question. If it says type of intensive, know the types of intensive. If it says types of diversification, know the types of diversification. Now we look into the action verb that you should know to deal with, and the focus is on a scenario, but code this time, not identify. We are done with content that needs to be identified. So the content that need to be quoted is as follows. Legislations. All legislations are applicable again, grade 12s. All legislations should be part of And what should you look into specifically? Be able to quote ways to comply with all legislations and be able to provide other ways to comply on should a follow-on question be asked. So you should know how to quote all ways to comply with the legislation. Labor Relations Act. You should know how to quote the employer's rights and employees' rights according to the Labor Relations Act. And National Credit Act, you should know how to quote consumer rights according to National Credit Act. Then Skills Development Act, you should know how to quote the meaning of learnership. You should know how to quote roles of SETAs. You should know how to quote the National Skills Development Strategy and the Human Resource Development Strategy. And you should further know how to quote funding of SETAs. Now, the first typical exam question, it is on the scenario, but what is the action verb there? Is quote. And with the question that has quote, you will have a sentence that is aimed at distracting you from quoting the correct what now? The correct sentence. Therefore, we have Katlego Logistics. Katlego Logistics complied with now Labor Relations Act, which is Act 66 of 1995, by observing the rights of employees in the workplace. Do we have an answer there? No. Employees take part in the legal strikes without any fear of victimization. They are also locked out by KL to prevent damages to the property, and the trade union representatives are given time off to attend to their respective duties. Therefore, quote two rights of employees in the Labor Relations Act from the scenario above. Now, I'm giving you 2 minutes to try to quote. I want to see something. I want to see if you remember your employees' rights according to Labor Relations Act. So let me give you 2 minutes. And then I come back with how you were supposed to go about answering it. Welcome back. Now, this is how you are supposed to go about answering this question that requires of you to quote. You read the scenario 3 times for proper understanding. Katlego Logistics complied with the Labor Relations Act, which is Act 66 of 1995, by observing the rights of employees in the workplace. Is there anything talking to the employees' right there? No. But employees taking part in a legal strike without fear of victimization is considered to be the right of the employee to participate in a legal strike. So this is correct. I will encircle it to show that this is a correct. This is the employee's right. They are also locked out by Katlego Logistics. And this is a business. The business is locking out the employees to prevent damages to their property. Is this an employee's right? No. This is the employer's right. Therefore, you are not expected to quote because this is a distractor. It is aimed at distracting you from quoting the correct answer. Therefore, we say the trade union representatives are given time off to attend to their respective duties. Therefore, this is considered to be what? To be the correct answer, because the trade union representatives are employees who are allowed to take time off to attend to their respective duties. So this one is correct. And I will encircle it to show that it was supposed to be quoted from the scenario. Now, let us check if I'm correct. Employees take part in a legal strike without any fear of victimization. Correct. The trade union representatives are given time off to attend to their respective duties. That is correct. And where is our distractor? They are locked out by KL. KL is the business. Therefore, we are not talking about the business here. We are not talking about the employer. We are talking about the rights of the employees. So that's how you get your 2 marks. Explaining other rights of employees in terms of labor relations. Employees have a right, grade 12 learners, to join a trade union of their choice. That's one. Employees have a right to refer an unresolved workplace dispute to the CCMA. Employees have a right to refer an unresolved CCMA dispute to the Labour Court on Appeal. Furthermore, employees have a right to request union representatives to assist and represent the employee in a grievance or disciplinary hearing. They also have a right to establish a workplace forum where employees has 100 or more employees to resolve work-related issues. Those are the rights of the employees. Now, we have another one. With this one, I'll start by saying, let me give you 5 minutes. You try to answer, and then I'll come back with the solution for you. Welcome back. Now, let us read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have Excel Bank, EB. Excel Bank offers various financial products to prospective clients. The bank allows clients to receive pre-agreement documentations before concluding any credit transaction. EB ensures that clients shop around for the best price. They allow clients to access and challenge their credit records. Therefore, Code 2 consumer rights in terms of National Credit Act, which is Act 34 of 2005, from the scenario above. So, 2. Remember, one of the sentences is a distract. 2 are correct. So, what do you see here? The bank allowing clients to receive pre-agreement documentations before concluding any credit transaction. That should be quoted. Therefore, it is correct quotation if you have quoted that one. Then, EB ensures clients shop around for the best price. Now, shopping around for the best price is a distractor because here we are talking about the right to choose, which is part of consumer protection, not for National Credit Act. Therefore, it cannot be correct. It cannot be quoted. Incorrect. They should allow clients to access and challenge their credit records. That is correct. Now, let's check. Yes, correct. Yes, correct. Where's our distractor? EB ensures that clients shop around for the best price. Therefore, this is what? This is the distractor. Then, explaining other consumer rights in terms of National Credit Act. Consumers have a right to apply for credit and to be free from discrimination of any form. That is correct. Consumers have a right to obtain reasons for credit being refused by credit providers. They have a right to receive protection of their personal information. They have a right to receive information in plain and understandable language, and also they have a right to receive documents as required by the Act, and also receive fair and responsible marketing and refuse a credit limit increase. So these are the other consumer rights. And when the question says other, do not include the consumer rights that you already quoted because you have obtained 2 marks. Explain other consumer rights beside the ones that you have quoted in 2.2.1. So you should avoid these responses in 2.2.2. Now we move to business strategy, where we look into the strategic management process and the strategic evaluation process. Now, with the strategic management process, you are expected again to quote from the scenario for both these two, so the examiner can either choose the strategic evaluation or the strategic management process. Therefore, let us look into both. Read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. Onnett Stationery OS implemented the diversification strategy to increase the market share. OS looked forward and backward into the implementation process, and OS identified strategies and weaknesses by conducting environmental scanning, and then OS identified deviations from set standards and 2 corrective measures. Then the questions now. Code 2 steps in strategy evaluation from the scenario above, or advise the management of OS on other steps in strategy evaluation. Therefore, 2 marks and 6. Let us look into the scenario. I do it with you this time. The first sentence tells you that the business OS implemented the diversification strategy to increase their market share. There's no answer there. And then OS looked forward and backward into the implementation process. Do we code that one? Yes, this is the strategy evaluation. But OS also identified strengths and weaknesses by conducting environmental scanning. Do we code that one? No, this is the strategic management process. So you need to know your content like you know yourself so that you become safe, or else you will code the incorrect information and you will end up forfeiting marks. OS identified deviations from set standards. That is correct for quotation because this is a strategic evaluation. Together with looking forward and backward into the implementation process, that is also correct. But where's our distractor? I made a cross to show you that identifying strengths and weaknesses is actually incorrect. So let's check the solution. Looking forward and backward, correct. And also identifying deviations is correct. Then, where's the distractor? The distractor is OS identifying strengths and weaknesses by doing environmental scanning. That is incorrect. Then, other steps include examine the underlying basis of the strategy, set specific dates for control and follow up, and then also draw up a table of advantages and disadvantages. My advice to you, grade 12 learners, only focus on the shortest responses so that you take your marks and you move to the next question. Like setting specific dates for control and follow up. This is very short. And remember, they should not be in any order. You can start with the last point from your notes as long as the point is short in terms of the phrase. Then take that as my advice, because the mark allocation is 6, meaning only 3 points are needed. So deciding on the desired outcome is also a short sentence to be considered. Then we move toward now business sectors and their environments. So with business sectors and their environments, you're expected to code the challenges, you're expected to classify and also state the extent of control. So this is how the question can be structured. You have 3 questions and a table here to guide you on how to answer. Now Zalo Enterprise. Zalo Enterprise sells variety of products to different customers. ZE always receives stock late from Smart Wholesaler. Smart Wholesaler is the supplier. The management of ZE has difficulty in dealing with unproductive employees. So employees are inside the business. Now, the question, code 2 challenges for ZE from the scenario above. Then classify ZE's challenges according to the business environment. Then state the extent of control that ZE has over each business environment classified in question 2.2.2. Now, let's start by quoting. Where is the challenge? The first challenge, they receive stock late from Smart Wholesaler. Then the other one, they have difficulty dealing with unproductive employees. Therefore, what is the solution? What is the challenge there? The challenge is from the supplier, who supplies the business late because the business receives stock late. Another challenge is difficult employees. So now let us look into saying, how do you go about? You code the challenge as it is. I did here. ZE always receives stock late from Smart Wholesale. ZE always receives stock late from Smart Wholesale. The management of ZE has difficulty with dealing with what? Unproductive employees. The management of ZE has difficulty in dealing with unproductive employees. Now, classify in which business environment. When we check, Smart Wholesaler is a supplier. Therefore, a supplier is in which environment? The market environment. Then the management of ZE has difficulty in dealing with unproductive employees. Employees are found where? Inside the business. Therefore, this is what? Micro environment. Now let's check the extent of control. Is the business having control over smart wholesaler? No, they don't have. They actually have less control. They have less what? Control. But then, is the business having full control over the employees or not? Yes, the business has full control. The business has full control over the microenvironment, but the business has less control over the market environment. That is how you should go about answering the state, the extent of control, and the classification. The classification is informed by the what? Challenge that you found in the scenario. So, with that being said, the summary of our lesson is we looked into the structure of the paper, we looked into the main topics, and the interpretation of section B and section C. We further looked into what now? The acts, to say how can each of these legislations be assessed from the use of identify as an action verb or the use of quote as an action verb. Then we also looked into the types of strategies, the strategic management process on how it can be assessed, the industry analysis tools, the types of business strategies, and the strategic evaluation process. We further looked into the industry analysis tools, which included the SWOT analysis, the Porter's 5, which is in the market environment, or the Pestel factor, which scans the macro. Then looked into the types of strategies, which included integration, intensive, diversification, and what? Defensive. Then we looked into business sectors and their environments. Then that was the end of our lesson over there. Then for the next lesson, we will be doing revision on paper 1, but the focus is on what? Business operations, which is quality of performance and human resources. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Keep well. Goodbye.